Okay, so good morning. My apologies for running a bit late, but here we go. As I said, uh, this daf is not the longest of dafim, so should be able to still finish before or around 8:30. Okay, so yesterday we began. Whoa, I'm so into Gittin that I titled this Gittin 3 instead of Kiddushin 3. Wow, that's how used to it highlights the fact that I'll use this as an opportunity to teach the important halacha that for the first 30 days after we change something in tefillah, whether it's talking about adding geshem or something else, if you don't remember what you did, we assume that you did the wrong thing, that you continue to do what you did before. So here I have continued to do what I did before. So my apologies. I will change it in my system, but I hope everyone will forgive me that it says Gittin instead of Kiddushin. That's
Well,
terrible. In any
it's
event,
it's
yesterday,
very interesting that Chazal put Kiddushin after Gittin because you have to have Kiddushin before you can have Get.
yes, that is absolutely true. And of course, there that leads to the very classic, not so funny joke, which is that there's this concept that Hashem always puts the solution out. This is, of course, told with respect to Megillus Esther, that Esther was in place before Haman, effectively became the leader that he was. And so, as a and thereby the enemy of the Jews, and so the Gemara talks about how the solution is always there before the problem begins. And so people say, so Gittin is the same way. We have the solution before the problem. And so before now, of course, you don't have to say it so much as a joke, but rather as an explanation that the point is that before we start talking about the commitment, we need to understand what the scope of that commitment is and when it can be voided. And so, as a result, that would be a partial explanation. Another explanation might be that we want to end on a high note. That in order to, if we were to do Kiddushin and then Gittin, so then Gittin would be the last Masechet in the Seder, and we don't want that. We want to We want to end on emphasizing the beauty of Kiddushin. So those are two different reasons that I would offer as to the question that you ask, which is sort of why do we have Gittin before Kiddushin? But in any
Well,
event,
I have a theory that
oh
this
please,
actually has an application today. So one of the objections to prenuptial halakhic prenups is that you shouldn't be thinking about getting divorced if you're about to get married. But
uh-huh.
here, Chazal clearly wanted us to think about getting divorced before we think about getting married.
Shkoach, I really like that. All right, I will add that to my repertoire. I think that that's a beautiful thought. That actually, in order to avoid the having anybody end up as an aguna, we should engage in the practice of making sure that we have the prenuptial agreement, so that we limit and the ability to engage, for any hanky panky, so to speak, and as a result, ensure that every Kiddushin is one that is beautiful. It's a reverse Murphy's Law. Of course, we all know that if you bring an umbrella, it doesn't rain. So too, God willing, we should have many prenuptial agreements, and they should never have to be used because the marriages are all beautiful and wonderful.
Amen.
So, all right. So what did we do when we began Maseches Kiddushin yesterday? We saw that there are three paths for a woman to be acquired in marriage, and of course, hopefully, we at least noted that the acquisition that we're talking about is not a personal acquisition; it's an acquisition in a more conceptual sense. So we certainly don't believe in Judaism that the husband owns the wife, but rather it is a legal combination, and so as a result, that is what we're talking about. But in any event, we're going to use that terminology of acquisition, and the point is that acquisition can happen in three different manners. It can happen via money, it can happen via contract, and it can happen via relations. And so the Gemara wondered why the Mishnah used the female language of shalosh for dirachim, and why it used dirachim paths rather than divarim, which would enable a masculine usage of shlosha. And so we explained that context is feminine, namely the wife, and dirachim is better since relations constitutes one of the methods of Kiddushin. So the Gemara now points out that there are other places where dirachim is used. So why don't we use devarim in those cases? Meaning, once we've given this answer for why we're using dirachim here instead of devarim, so then don't we need to apply that answer in other cases? So we're going to take a look at the first of these challenges, even though it was covered yesterday, and we're going to have a total of 4 different challenges, and we won't even be able to answer the last 2, which will result in us revisiting the entire concept. So let's take a look. We're at Vahad Ditanan, 4 lines from the bottom of Beis Amabet, and it is the third word on the line is Vahav. Vahad Ditanan. So in second we have a Mishnah. This was the Mishnah that we touched on yesterday. B'shiva drachim bodkin es zav, that we check a zav in 7 different manners, and Rashi tells us that we check whether the man ate. Now, of course, a zav, as a reminder, is a man who has a flow that is not necessary, that doesn't seem to come from any particular source. And so and Rashi explains, we need to check that this source was not one of 7 different possibilities that we need to check. And we actually had this. This Rashi is on yesterday's daf, but we can jump to the top of the daf, 4th line in Rashi. B'machal, we'll check what he ate. B'mishta, this is at the very top of Beis Hamabez, in the last of the wide lines of Rashi. We'll take a look at what he drank. B'cholei, we'll take a look at whether he's got some illness. B'masa, whether he carried something in a way that might have caused an unnatural flow. B'kafitza, whether he had some kind of jumping, his movements, might have caused the flow. Umara, it may be something that he saw. That's certainly something that's we understand even more naturally. V'hirhur, or something that he thought about. All of that could potentially influence the likelihood of a flow. And if he did have a flow that was influenced by one of those 7 things, well, then that would be, and so Rashi continues, Shema Machos Echad Mehen Rav, maybe because of one of these reasons he saw the anusu, and as a result, it was against his will, the tahor, and as a result, the Torah would say that he is tahor and not tameizav. Why? Derachmana Amar mibsaro me'elav, that the Torah says that it has to come from his flesh, meaning on its own, below machmas owners, and not as a result of something else. But the ha'isha, and when it comes to a woman and the zavah status, remember we're talking here about a man and a zav status, but a woman with her zavah status, but onus nami mitama. When it comes to an onus situation, even though something happened beyond her control that caused a blood to flow, so as a result, she is still tamei. Keda amar b'perak banos kutim, as we'll see in Maseches Nida, keshehu omer ki yazov zav dama hare onis omer amor. That when it says that it flows her blood, so then that's referring to an even and onus situation. So okay, so that is. We're going to check, but the bottom line is what word did we use here? We use dirachim. So lidnei dvarim. Why don't you learn dvarim? After all, we're talking about men. So as a result, saying that we want to use a feminine word, that doesn't work, because we should use dvarim, a masculine word. So hasam hakamash malan. Whoa, well, this is what it's teaching us. Didarka demechla yiseiru la'asuya lidei ziva, v'darka lemishte yiseiru la'asuya lidei ziva. That the way of zav is that if you eat too much or you drink too much, well, then that makes it much more likely that you will have some sort of flow. And as a result, what we're trying to highlight is that there is a pattern, that derech drachim emphasizes pattern, emphasizes that one thing follows something else. Okay, well, all right, that works with respect to Zav, but what about the following Mishnah of Ahaditanan Esrog Shava Li'ilan Begimel Drachim Lisnei Dvarim? We say that an Esrog, this is a Mishnah in Bikurim, and we say that an Esrog is like a tree in three different ways, meaning that we're comparing it to a tree because, of course, it grows on a tree. But the idea is that there's an element to an esrog that is also like a vegetable. We will see. And so the point is why not say divarim instead of dirachim again? And so the Gemara answers mishum debi'inan misnei seifa liyerek v'derech echad, and it's similar to vegetables in one way. Okay, well, 1 second. So we again say derech in the end. So as a result, we want to say derech in the beginning. Well, that doesn't really answer the question now, does it? Because seifa nami nisnei davar. Why not say at the end of that Mishnah that you use the word davar as well? This is what the word derech is teaching when it comes to a vegetable. The darke, the esro kiyarak, that there is an aspect of the growth process of an esrog that is like a vegetable. Ma yarak darko ligdal al kol mayim, that just as a vegetable can grow with all sorts of water, ubishas likito isuro, and at the time that you pick it, that's when you take the meiser. Esrog darko ligdal al kol mayim ubishas likita so isuro, and so that so too a vegetable. An esrog is also grows on all kinds of water, namely both irrigation and rainfall. And at the time that it's picked, that's when you take the meiser. So again, this is a process issue, and so as a result, that just as we did with respect to zav, we're going to say it with respect to esrog. All right, but 1 second, there are more drachim that could be divarim, because v'haditnan, we got another Mishnah in Bikurim. This is 2 Mishnayos later, Parak Beis Mishnah Chet. Koi, this is a koi. We've seen it before. It's like it's a deer ram kind of thing, but the issue is it's a hybrid animal, and it's really hybrid because it has elements of both being a wild animal and a domesticated animal. And so koi yesh bo drachim shaveh lechaya, but yesh bo drachim shaveh levehema, that there is an aspect of a koi that is similar to or equal to a wild animal, a chaya, and there are ways in which it is similar to a domesticated animal. So v'yeshbo drachim shaveh lechaya levehema. So now we're going to tell us what they are. V'yeshbo drachim she'eno shaveh lo lechaya. And not only that, but yeshbo drachim shaveh lechaya ulehema. And there are ways that it's similar to both, meaning that there are some things that are common to both groups and are true for a koi as well, namely that you need shchita, for example. And then there are ways that it's not similar to either. Okay, in particular, a koi is not able to be crossbred with either a domesticated animal or a wild animal. So nisnei dvarim. So why didn't that Mishnah teach us dvarim? Visu, and moreover, we have another Mishnah. This Mishnah was we saw at the beginning of Maseches Gittin, Haditanan Zoachas min hadrachim sheshavu gitei nashim l'shechrurei avadim. That we saw that there are different ways in which a get for divorce is similar to a get to free a slave, and so again, nisnei dvarim. Why not say dvarim instead of dirachim? Ella. So as a result, we've rejected our initial answer, and it has nothing to do with the specific context, but rather this is the reason that we use dirachim instead of divarim. Ella kol heka deika plugta tanek dirachim. Whenever there are important distinctions to make among the laws of a particular topic, we will use the word dirachim. But when there's no differentiation, tanu devarim, then we'll use the word devarim. And dekanami de katani seifa. Indeed, if you take a look at the end of our Mishnah that talked about the esrog, that was Bikurim Perak Bet Mishnah Vav, we saw it says Rabbi Eliezer Omer esrog shaveh leilan l'chol davar, that when it comes to Rabbi Eliezer's position, he says that an esrog is similar to a tree in every way. There are no distinctions. And once there are no distinctions, so then as a result, we can use the term davar. Shema mina. All right, you've done it. You've proven the language aspect that we had confusion about in our Mishnah, and that has been addressed. So, okay. So now the question is, our Mishnah mentioned three things at the start. It said, let's go back. We'll turn back to Beis and Aleph, and we'll see the very top. It says, Ha'isha niknas b'shalosh derachim, and then it tells us what those three different ways are. And then at the end of the Mishnah, it says, V'kona, where does it say? And then at the end, it's interesting. It doesn't actually say the word two, but at the end, it says that she acquires herself in two different ways. And then it specifically says the different ways, get and misas habal. So now the Gemara is going to ask, what are we trying to exclude in this? So minyana dereisha lemuute mai, minyana dezeva lemuute mai. So what were we trying to exclude when it came to the fact that we were, trying to exclude, this situation? So I'm going to just, get. So why does it specifically? Okay, so why? It's interesting because our Mishnah does not actually say that that she acquires herself in Bishnei Drachim, but it just lists the two different ways. But in any event, the point is what do we learn? What are we excluding by listing those two ways? What is not included? So minyan reisha lemuute chupa. So we'll begin with the answer to the first question, which is that the first number comes to teach that chuppah does not work for Kiddushin. And so, Ula Rav Huna, Damar Chuppah Kona. Well, 1 second. That's not a universal position. Rav Huna says that a chuppah does acquire, can make a Kiddushin, can fulfill a Kiddushin. So, Mikal V'chomer. After all, we have a Kal V'chomer, namely that a chuppah enables, a husband and wife to be together. And so, and we'll see this Kal V'chomer on Friday, God willing, so as a result, it should be able to do more than Kiddushin, which only enables, prohibits the woman to the rest of the world. So l'ma'ute mai. So in which case, what does the number 3 come to exclude? L'ma'ute chalipin. That I might have thought there's another manner of acquisition known as chalipin, where you exchange one thing for something else. So for example, I give you my pen, but not like as a deal, as a trade to buy your car, but as an indication that I'm taking ownership of your car, and you give me your car, and as a result, I have acquired your car through your picking up of the pen, and indeed, ordinarily you'll just give me back my pen, so it's not as if it's a trade at all. So the point is chalipin does not work with respect to creating Kiddushin. Because I might have thought because we're going to see that one of the sources for the fact that one can use money to acquire to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddushin, we learn it from the fact that both when it comes to taking a wife, we use the word kicha, and ki yikach ish, and similarly, when in connection with stay Ephron, Abraham tells Ephron to take a kach mimeni, take the money from me. So as a result, Masa the Mekanya bechalifin. Now, what was Abraham trying to acquire? He was trying to acquire a field, and a field can be acquired through chalifin, meaning by giving you a handkerchief, even if that handkerchief turns out to be worthless or virtually worthless. It's just representative. And so as a result, I can use that as a mechanism to acquire your field. So maybe I would think that a woman could also be acquired by a chalifin. So kamash malan. So as a result, that's why the Torah, that the Mishnah needs to tell us, the Mishnah needs to tell us the number 3, because that tells us that chalifin is not one of the methods of Kiddushin. Well, one second, why not say that maybe it does work? Maybe chalifin should be able to work. Well, chalifin is new, but pruta. But the problem is that a chalifin can be done with something that's worth less than a shava pruta. The isha b'pachas b'shava pruta. As we turn to Gimel Amabet, lo makanya nafsha. She is not going to be willing to give herself over for less than a shava pruta. So let's take a quick look at Rashi, top of the daf, lo makanya nafshe. The ganayhula. It's embarrassing to her if she is going to be acquired for something so minimal as a shava pruta. Hilkach, but as something less than a shava pruta. Hilkach batila l'toras chalipin. As a result, so we say that we're not going to have any kind of chalipin done by the Kiddushin. Even if you were to try to do chalipin with something that was worth more than a shava pruta, like my pen, for example, if you use the language of chalipin, meaning essentially, that won't work. Lashon Kinyan or Kika or Kiddushin. You need to use a different language. Of course, we use the third of those languages. Harei at mikudeshesli b'tavad zo keduras Moshe v'Yisrael. So that is the language that we use. That it makes clear that we are doing it in a sense of Kiddushin. But if you were to use the language of Chalipin, that would be a problem. Now, Tosfos has a problem with that because we are going to see that if it's all about the woman taking offense, we're going to see that when it comes to Beit Shammai, who said that it's not just a shava pruta, that it needs to be a shava dinar, that a woman may marry even with less if she's willing to. And so what really seems to be going on is that it's only when she doesn't know the value, such as when something is given to her at night, that's where we're going to say if it's a shava pruta according to Beit Hillel and a shava dinar according to Beit Shammai. But so let's take a look in Tosfos, the last Tosfos on Gimel Amud Aleph. We'll just do the beginning of it. Perish bekuntras mishum deganayhula. Right, Rashi explains that the problem with her acquiring, being mikadeshes, is that it is with a chalipin, is that it's embarrassing to her. So hilkach batel Torah's chalipin, so that the Kiddushin, and that's why the rabbi said that you can't use chalipin for Kiddushin. Even if you use something that's worth a shava pruta, if you give it to her with the concept of chalipin. Because Rabbeinu Tam says this is problematic. If that's true, then what happens if she's willing? Meaning, if she's willing, why not allow her to be acquired with something that's less than a shava pruta? V'od kaven de tali taima mishum de genaihula. Once you say that the problem is because it's offensive to her. Im kain amailo parach begemara benati the Rebbe Yanai. That when it benteya the Rebbe Yanai, when it came to the daughters of Rebbe Yanai, to kaptu anafshayu v'lo mekaji b'pachos mitarkava the dinari, that they refused to be married for anything less than 3 kav of golden dinars. So why not just ask on that? Well, one second, that's for them. For them, that's the problem. But for others, it'll be a different amount. Meaning, what matters is the ganai to women generally. So why should it matter what these women were willing to do? So kiheka de paralakaman al milsa de Beit Shammai, and we could have answered the same answer that we answered to Beit Shammai, that we were talking about at night. And so they didn't realize that it was a problem. Why did we instead answer that those women were specifically different? The migmar kinyane isha mikinyane sadeh. Moreover, if the whole point of this question is that we're learning the ways that one acquires a wife is similar to the ways in which one acquires a field. Imkain isha nami tikne b'chazaka. Let a woman be acquired through doing an act of ownership. Kamo sadeh, like by a field. Va'od dilakaman by gemara b'shtar minalan. Umay by ligmar misadeh. Moreover, we're going to ask on Friday, how do we know about a star? And why not just answer that we can learn it from a field? Because after all, we're learning everything from a field. So lakach nira lo Rabbeinu Tama de garsinim b'pachas mishava pruta lo mekanya. That all you should say is that with a less than a shava pruta, it doesn't work. It's not a kinyan. Below gars nafsha, it's not about her opinion. It's about it just doesn't work. The low kapeda talya milsa, it's not based on her lack of willingness. Ella hachitaima mishum de gamar kika kika mistay Ephron. The point is that we learn kika kika from stay Ephron, from the field that Abraham bought, diksiv be kesef, because in connection with that field, it specifically says silver, that silver was given, and we understand the concept of silver, even though, as Charlie has pointed out before, at the time that the Torah took place, the kesef as money was not something that was really present, really used. But in any event, the point is that we understand kesef, even in the Torah time, to mean money. Lo mikri kesef, and we don't call anything that is less than a shava pruta kesef. And so that's the concept. And so as a result, that's what's going on here. And it's not about a woman's lack of willingness, but rather the drasha that we're learning, it doesn't go so far as to cover kicha, as to cover chalipin, and that explains why we don't have chalipin by Kiddushin, and why we also don't answer, oh, let's just focus on kicha when it comes to using a star. Okay, so now that we
I have a question.
please go ahead.
Yeah, so a pruta was a small copper coin,
Yes.
and a dinar was a denarius, which was a small silver coin, about 4
Well,
grams.
there's also a dinar zahav, but yes.
Yeah, so dinars of Hab were not in the Roman Empire; they were in Persia, and so actually, I guess they would have seen dinars of Harlem in Bavel, but they wouldn't have seen them in the Roman Empire. But back to that. So if we're really talking about kesef, how could you use a copper coin for Kiddushin?
100%. No, that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make, is that although clearly kesef means silver, and clearly based on historical records, kesef in the time of the Chumash was only silver and not actually a coin. We understand kesef the way it is colloquially used, and the rabbis understood and effectively read into the Torah that the kesef that was used is a monetary item. That even if you were to say that kesef only existed as a sort of slug of silver, that the rabbis certainly understood, and understood in this particular concept in particular, that kesef means the mechanism of exchange. And so as a result, kesef means money, not silver. And so as a result, you're absolutely right. A pruta is not made out of silver, and yet nonetheless we will allow it to be used because it is viewed as the minimal value associated with a monetary system, even though it is not the minimum value. Obviously, there were smaller values as well.
And in terms of the value, a denarius was about the size of a modern dime, only about twice as thick, and it's got about in the Mishnaic times it would have had about 3 grams of silver, which at today's exchange rate is worth $2, $3. That doesn't sound like a lot. Pruta is worth very close to nothing, but even a denarius is not going to be worth a lot of money. And then in the Amoraic times, because of the debasement of the currency, it would have been worth even less. But this was were people really that poor back then?
Oh, well, there's no question that people were really that poor back then. And I think the answer to that is absolutely. And I think that, I mean, they were that poor. Not even you don't have to go back that far to get to that kinds of those kinds of poverty. Within the Jewish community. So I think the answer is yes to that.
Mm,
Unfortunately, so it further highlights how much we should recognize how blessed we are to live in the modern time.
amen.
All right. Okay. So we have now answered the answer with respect to the first number in the Mishnah. Well, Minyan and Deseifa, what do we have? What's the story with the fact that we specifically list two different ways? The Ma'uti Chalitza, it comes to exclude Chalitza. So, Stalka Daita Chamina, because what might I have thought? Teise Bekal B'chomer Miyavama, that we could make a Kal B'chomer from Yibum. That Ma Yivama She'ena Yotza Beget, when it comes to a Yivama, remember a Yivama is a widow whose whose husband did not have any children, and whose husband's brother is alive, and so she is going to be have a Zika relationship with the husband's brother until he either does yibum with her or does chalitza, but she cannot be released with a get. But yotza b'chalitza, but she can be released with chalitza. So zo, a wife, she yotza beget. Eno din she yotza b'chalitza. Shouldn't she certainly be able to go out with chalitza? So Kamash Malan, that's why our Mishnah needs to tell us that it's only two ways, that actually we wouldn't be able no, we wouldn't be able to make this Kal V'chomer, and indeed the Kal V'chomer gets rejected. The Ema Hachanami, well, one second, that sounds like a decent Kal V'chomer. Why not say it? So Amar Kra, Sefer Krisus. No, the Torah tells us that you need, when it comes to divorce, you need a Sefer Krisus. You need some kind of written document. Sefer Korsa ve'ein davar acher Korsa. So we have a biblical derivation that says that only a document has the ability to undo a marriage. Okay, so now we begin the process of understanding how kesef works. What is the basis for saying kesef is a means of kedushin? So, but kesef, minalan, how do we know? Visu, and moreover, v'haditnan ha'av zakai bevito b'kedusheha b'chesef b'shtaru b'via. That we have a Mishnah that says that this is a Mishnah that we learned back in Maseches Ketubot, Daf Mem Vav Amaved, that the father has rights in his daughter when it comes to kedushin, whether it's kesef, shtar, ubia, whatever the method of kedushin, that he has the ability to effectuate it. So minalan to mikanya bekesef. How do we know that she's acquired through kesef, the kesef da'avuahu, and moreover that he gets it, that the father gets it? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Amar Krav Yatzachinam in kesef, that when it comes to a Jewish maidservant, we say in Sefer Shmos, in Parshas Mishpatim, that she goes out for free, and ein kasef, no money. So ein kesef la'adon zeh. So we're going to derive that this master doesn't get any money when she becomes a na'ara, and she goes out to become free. Aval yesh kesef la'adon acher. But when a different na'ara will go out, then the master in that situation will get money. Umani, who is that other master? That's the father. The ema ladida. Well, in second, okay, when it's a minor and she is, essentially all totally controlled by her, I can understand why the father would get it, because he gets everything that she has. But what about a nara? Once she becomes an adult, where she has developed the simanim of adulthood, but she hasn't yet turned 12 and a half, so she's not a bogeret. So as a result, she's sort of in this in-between state. And maybe we should say that she gets to keep the money. So haki hashta, 1 second. Avia makabel kedusha, indeed, 1 second. So the Gemara asks, how could that possibly be? We're going to say Avia Makabel Kedusha, that the father is going to do the Kiddushin. Diksiv SBT Natati Leishazah in Dvarim, when it talks about a father who complains about the way that his daughter has been treated by her husband, who is complaining about her bona fides, and he says, at Bitina Tati said, I gave my daughter to this man, and we're definitely talking about a Nara. The Shakla Kaspa, so he's going to do the giving and she's going to take the money. That doesn't make any sense. Well, 1 second. Maybe the right that the father has to keep the Kiddushin money only is when she's a minor. Because she doesn't have the ability to accept Kiddushin on her own. She's just a minor. She does have the ability to accept Kiddushin on her own. Tikdish the Tishkol Kaspa. Maybe she should, effectively get herself married, and she should get the money. So how do we know that the father gets the money, even though she's a Nara? So Amar Kra Binura Besavia. So we have, in connection with oaths, we say that it goes to that the Na'ara is in her father's house. And we say that the father has the ability to annul those vows. Kol Shevach Ne'urim La'avia. And we're going to read it more broadly and say every benefit that the Na'ara gets goes to her father. Well, 1 second. Ve'ela Hada Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Well, 1 second, we have a statement of Rav Huna in the name of Rav. Minayin Shema say Habas La'av. How do I know that the daughter's produce, that what she makes, actually goes to the father? Right? The father has the ability to sell his daughter as a maidservant. Just as a maidservant, all of her products go to her master. Similarly, everything that a daughter, who even if she's a nara, goes to the father. So tepa glay b'menu Rav Beisavia. Well, 1 second. If Rav actually said, if we actually have this concept that Benu Rav Beisavia tells us that all the profits of the Nara go to her father, why do we need the statement? Why do we need to learn anything from V'chiyim Kor Ishas Bitolama? Let's learn it from Benu Rav Beisavia. So Ella B'Hafaras Nadarim Hu Diksiv. The problem is that when it comes to Hafaras Nadarim, that's where Benu Rav Beisavia is written. And so we can't learn out generally. So hachinami b'afaras nadarim hu diksiv. So too here. That's why. So 1 second, you wanted to use Binu Rav Beisavia to say that the father of a Na'ara gets to keep the Kiddushin money, but we just saw that Rav rejects that reasoning and uses a different pasuk to say that a father gets all the produce of the daughter. And we've explained that the reason that he wouldn't learn it from Binu Rav Beisavia is because that statement is only with respect to the annulment of vows. Well, that undermines our usage as well. And if you want to say, hey, why don't we just learn from the fact that the father has the right over the vows of a daughter to say that she can not, to undo a vow, and therefore he should also have the rights to money. Problem is, we can't learn monetary laws from prohibitions, from rules associated with vows. Well, 1 second. Well, maybe we can learn it from the fact that the father of a daughter who has unfortunately been violated or has been seduced, that the penalty payment goes to him, because the Torah is explicit about that. Well, mamona mekansa lo yafinan. Well, the problem is we can't even learn monetary laws from penalty payments, because penalty payments are exactly that, penalties. And so even though it involves money, we can't be sure that just as the father would receive the penalty payment, he would get the money. Well, 1 second. We have another thing that the father gets, and that is if in fact the woman has been raped. Well, then the man who did that to her also needs to pay the father for the daughter's humiliation and devaluation. And so as a result, but shiny poshas upagam, but the Gemara answers, no, you can't even learn from that kind of monetary payment because boshas and pagam because the father has a stake in them, as Rashi says, because we say, this is Rashi, middle of the wide lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up in the wide lines from the very bottom of Rashi. We learned in Maseches Ketubot notain boshas upagam la'av v'hanu lav konsolinhu. This payment is, so this is now on the question, right? That it's that he gets. I'm sorry, I realized I underlined the wrong Rashi, but we can do this Rashi also. This is the Rashi on the question to explain the question. That the question is she should shouldn't this indicate that the father gets monetary payments? After all, this boshas and pagam payment, the payment for humiliation and devaluation, is a monetary payment, and in fact would result in and goes to the father. So too, Kiddushin is a monetary payment, and let's say that it goes to the father. So the Gemara answers, no, shiny boshas begam, the avua shayach begavayu, that the father has a connection with it. And Rashi there, next Rashi, says, sheyesh lo din chelik behen. He specifically has a legal rights to them. Sheyesh biyado levai shalu fugma, because he has the ability to effectively embarrass or depreciate the value of his daughter, bishvil mamon, in exchange for receiving some monetary payment sheyitnu lo, that are given to him. Because if he wanted to, masala menuval umukashkin, he could give it to somebody who's not a nice person, who's a disgusting kind of person, or somebody who has bodily illnesses. Dehavila boshas upagam, that would cause her both a sense of embarrassment and a devaluation. Va'anos zeh sheba'aleh, and this rapist who came on her, mechaser mamon zeh shezilzala v'lo yakaptzu aleh tovin. So now he has eliminated this opportunity for the father, and so as a result, or diminished this opportunity for the father, and so as a result, the father has a claim against him. It is the father's claim, but that does not exist in the context of Kiddushin. So where have we left off? What we've left off is the fact is that the Gemara has not answered how we know that the father of a Na'ara is entitled to the money when he marries off his daughter. So if you want to understand the answer to how we know that, you're going to need to stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. So wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel, and looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a
Dr. Clark.
Be well. Bye-bye, everybody.
Rabbi, as usual.